Cheer up, my brother, live in the sunshine. We'll understand it all by and by. When death has come and taken our loved ones, it leaves our home so lonely and drear. Then do we wonder why others prosper, living so wicked year after year. Farther along we'll know all about it. Farther along we'll understand why. Cheer up, my brother, live in the sunshine. We'll understand it all by and by. When we see Jesus coming in glory, when he comes from his home in the sky, then we shall meet him in that bright mansion. We'll understand it all by and by. Farther along we'll know all about it. Farther along we'll understand why. Cheer up, my brother, live in the sunshine. We'll understand it all by and by. Tempted and tried, we're oft made to wonder why it should be thus all the day long, while there are others living about us, never molested, going the wrong. Farther along we'll know all about it. Farther along we'll understand why. Cheer up, my brother, live in the sunshine. We'll understand it all by and by. When death has come and taken our loved ones, it leaves our home so lonely and drear. Then do we wonder why others prosper, living so wicked year after year. Farther along we'll know all.
All right, 1 Timothy 3. We're going to get a purpose statement. So obviously when you're studying letters and you come across, this is why I'm writing to you, you really ought to make note of that. Now we've gotten some other purposes that why Paul is writing this. We've seen that from chapter 1, dealing with false teachers. So he's given us some purpose statements, if you will, but you'll see the most clearest statement now in 1 Peter chapter 3 and verses 14 through 16 as he finishes out this chapter. And it's a beautiful verses, and we'll talk about them here in just a moment. Let someone read this. Let someone read this for us. 1 Timothy 3, 14 through 16. Who'd like to finish that? Okay, Ivana. Okay, so you've got this purpose statement. He says, I hope to come to you soon. And I'm writing you these instructions so that if I'm delayed, he says what there in verse 15? You know how to conduct yourself. Some translations will say behave. And the idea here, just a little bit in this word, in the verb tense, it's an infinitive. It's a passive. It's a present passive. It's something that you have stopped doing and now you're doing. Is what he wants them to do. I stop something and I start doing it, and the idea is I continue to do it. It's action done in the past that has continuing, ongoing results. That I'm doing this. I want you to do this, and so to conduct yourself here, to behave. There's a way that he wants the church to act, and so he's talking here about how you live, how you act, how you behave. So why is this important? Why does this matter in the church? Okay, how can we be an influence? And he's going to talk about that, I think, again. How can we be an influence? What else? Why does this matter, what he's saying to the church? That this is what I expect. This is what I'm writing. Okay, we should have reverence. What else? A couple of... Okay, yeah. We have to be different from the world. We lose our purpose. There's something here, though, about the expectation, right? I mean, any job or any school's going to start here in a few weeks. Sorry, teachers. I'm married to one. She's not in here to hear that. Some of you are. I'm sorry. Going to hear that. But you've got to do that on day one, right? You don't wait and start someone out on the new job and then a month later, a week later, say, oh, now this is what we, right? There's expectations. Why is that important? What does that do? Why? Okay. Why is that important? Well, there's something here that's important. Why do you tell someone when you start on day one, this is what you're supposed to do? What does that come with? What's the result, or what's that carry? What's the significance of that in a job context? There's an expectation. There's an accountability. This is how you do this. This is what's expected. Why is that important? To avoid chaos? People deciding to do what? Whatever I think we ought to do it this way. Right? I think it'd be better. You ever worked with someone? You ever dealt with someone in that situation? Yeah, Jeff? Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely here. And Cindy said something about chaos. You ever seen that in these situations? Not just church, but just in life when there's not clearly communicated expectations, accountability. It produces instability every time, right? When I do marry someone, they have to get premarital counseling. Now, they don't have to do it with me. Sometimes I will farm that out because we feel like, maybe there's someone that would be better, or I'm too close, whatever. There's various reasons. But they have to do premarital counseling if I'm going to marry them. If not, find another minister. Uh, so, and one of the things that we cover in those premarital is we got to talk expectations. Well, I thought she was going to do this. I thought his job in the marriage was to, yeah, that we got to talk. Well, I kind of thought, and then it becomes, well, my dad always cooked and did the dishes, or my mom always, and that kind of stuff, we kind of smile and can kind of chuckle at that. That stuff causes what? Real problems, real conflict, real quick. Expectations leads to, when you don't have that, instability, chaos. I like that. Confusion. Go ahead, yeah. Yes. I mean, there are certain companies and businesses. I'll use my son working at Chick-fil-A. He works at Chick-fil-A in Tulsa Hills, so if you ever get over that way, be sure and pester him if you do. Make him smile a little bit. Someone asked that, does he smile a lot? Not a lot, but he'll give them out. He's got a nice smile. He's going to get his braces off in a few weeks, so I think that'll help. But, what is Chick-fil-A known for, among other things? Their service. The quality, the speediness, the what? My pleasure. That, Yeah, they don't work on Sunday. I mean, so any company this leads to a quality. This produces something that people want. When we don't have that in the church, when we have chaos and confusion and disorder and false teaching, what does that do? Nothing for the church, for people. And, the Lord mentioned that, some others have mentioned. How are we going to influence others? I mean, this is one of the few times Paul's going to really talk about in this letter inside the church. He's been talking, we talked about elders and deacons, and remember how we talked about they got to have a good reputation from the outside. All that's important for the influence of the church. It's got to start inside. And so he's really going to stress that if internally a house is not in order, it's not stable, and who wants to offer that to the world? Who wants to accept that, come into that? There's been people over the years, and I've been a part of that with couples and marriages and other people in the church that say, when I married into this family, I had never seen that kind of a family before. Some of you, can you relate to that? Have you seen that? Where maybe a spouse or maybe one of your in-laws or they came from what kind of family background? Not bad, right? And they come in and they go, I've never seen people act like this, and that is so attractive, It was so attractive. I know if my mother-in-law was here, she would say that was one of the things that she was really impressed when she met and started dating John, Maggie's dad, the Rampy family, the love, the faith that family had. And, and sometimes we just drive by every now and then, the old house there off of 51st and Union, right there off of in West Tulsa. And the house there, a little less than 1,000 square feet. Roland and Betty Rampy raised 4 kids, one of them Maggie's dad. Milkman. I mean, just a humble man. But Judy, when she saw love and faith like she hadn't seen. And so you've seen that. That is attractive, isn't it, to people? And that's what the church should be. Yeah, Jeff? Uh-huh. it makes a huge difference. And as Paul's writing this letter, he's covering the gauntlet of personal life and how we treat each other, and he's going to get into some of that in the second half now of the letter. It's a beautiful thing when the church acts the way it is supposed to. Now he's going to use some. Look what he says here. Look how he describes that the conduct themselves in God's household, which is the church of the living God. That the people here are depicted as the family of God, the living God. And then he uses some of these descriptions here to describe what the church is. He's going to talk about this pillar, foundation, and he's just mentioned the household. So he uses these three different terms. Now we've seen that with household, with elders and deacons. We talked about if a man doesn't know how to manage or oversee his own family, influence his own family, how can he influence the church? So we've seen that. This pillar, and then a word, older words, older translations, a buttress, a foundation, right? Some of you guys that know about, construction and homes and foundation and pillars and all that stuff nobody sees when they look at a house. As far as, we've been doing some remodeling to our house. We'd like to eventually, move over this way. And so there's some things we need to do. We've still got, Camden's finishing up at Berry Hill. And so there's some, the move over here is a little bit more, going to be a little more longer to happen and some things of that nature. And was thankful that the elders were very patient when we interviewed, that they understood that. And so it's a of course I didn't, things you can control like the market and the interest rates and things of that nature make it, complicated. But so we've started doing some remodeling, different things, because that stuff, we know what really sells, right? You come in and you see, new paint and new this and new that. But what really, what really can make or break your house is what you don't see. Anybody had foundation issues in Oklahoma? Huh? What can that do to a house? The doors won't close, right? Can really. So, pillar, the foundation of the church. This is so critical, he says, that you conduct yourself in God's household, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and the foundation of the truth here. Again, and I think what he's depicting there is this idea of your behavior. It is you're either strengthening yourself, you're aligning yourself with the truth, with the foundation, or you're slanting, or you're slouching, or you're sloping over. You're sliding. You're not stable. And again, we've seen that in people's lives when they're not living according to the gospel and according to the truth. Their lives are, again, to use Cindy's word, their lives are chaos. Their lives are anything but stable. And he says here, this is what the church is. And so this is what we're able to offer and to be for the world is. And I think this may be our secret weapon we have, if we'll get back to this a little bit in the church. It's hard right now in this country. People, maybe are not as receptive in some ways, and this, that, and the other, and we can talk about the declining of the church. But I think if we can hold fast and continue to model and show a different way in a chaotic, confused world, I think we can shine bright in this culture. This is, as our world goes more and more out of control and instability, I think the church can be a great beacon of light when it comes to show them something that people can build their lives on, a foundation. And by the way, that's why we're not chasing the culture, the trends of the culture. I'm not worried anymore about being out of step with the culture. Stop thinking like that if we do. Well, what are we going to look like in 30 years? What we're going to be out of. I'm not chasing the culture. The culture is crazy and what they're coming up with. And yeah, I may look bad for a while and we may be judged by the culture in some ways, but people are going to see that God's word is true and right and beneficial. And so as the world goes more and more down these paths, we've just got to be, we don't want to get hostile. Okay, this is me side note now, I'm preaching. That's not going to do anybody any good if you get hostile with the culture. You're just a bunch of bad people. Are you crazy? What is the matter with you? And you're just, that's not going to help us. We need to quietly, with love and gentleness, yes, stand for truth but we just got to shine and hold to the truth. And I think people will see that as they go down this path of just chaos that the world is embracing with our culture. And so I think this may be our secret weapon, that the church can be this pillar and foundation of the truth in a world that is just, it's gone mad and it's out of control. Yeah, go ahead. No, they don't. But at some point, they've got to be confronted with it. And I think at times our culture is getting confronted with it. And sometimes I don't think they like what they see. And even we see that. Right. Yeah, we've got to continue to be what God calls us to be, and in loving, gracious, kind way, but in firm on the rock. So let's look at here. Let's look at these descriptions, okay? As we kind of talked about them. Let's talk about verse 16. Verse 16 is loaded. It is one of the richest, deepest theological verses in all the New Testament. And so let's look at that. Go ahead, Kathy. Yeah, jump in there. Yeah, it is. It is the definition of what gospel is, and that's why this is so important. Now, a couple of things about this. It appears to be an early Christian hymn. That seems to answer what is the truth. Paul's just been kind of banging on this idea of the truth, and the church is built on the foundation and the pillar and the support, and now what is the truth? And so and it's written in a way that most New Testament scholars believe, just like Philippians 2. 5 through 11, that although he was, he became obedient and took on the form of a bondservant and he emptied himself, most Christian scholars believe the way that's our translators offset it, it is some sort of poem or song or hymn that the early church would sing. That makes sense. They would sing their theology just like we sing our theology, and whether that was a part of already or going to be, it's a beautiful statement. Now, he's talked a little bit already about truth and about the gospel. Now, let's remind ourselves a couple of the definitions from chapter 1, 12 through 17. You remember he talks about God's mercy. And remember, he puts himself in that example and says, I'm the worst of sinners, right? But in me, it was shown an example of God's mercy. And so that was the kind of the first working definition, that God's mercy and grace is poured out and in kind of showing. And then in the second one we talked about, remember, in chapter 2, verses 3 through 7, those verses where God desires all men to be saved and that he gave Jesus as a ransom. And so he's kind of defined the gospel in that term, in those ways. And now this third one, the third one here. Beyond all question. What's that mean? without a doubt. There's no debate. You can't argue, what is the truth? What is the gospel? The mystery. Mystery, of course, was that which was hidden, but now has been made known. That's the idea there in the Bible. It's not something you can't discover or find, but it's something that was not made known and now has been revealed. The mystery from which true godliness springs is great. He appeared in the flesh, was vindicated by the Spirit, seen by angels, preached among the nations, believed on the world, was taken up in glory. This godliness, this truth, is not a what, it's a who. It's not a what. There's nothing wrong with saying, what do we believe? Okay, I'm not against that, and I'm okay with that language, but really, it's not the gospel, the truth. It does not center around, well, what does your church believe? No, it's who we believe in. It's a personal, it's he. Not a what, but a he. It's a he. How is that good news? Why is that good news? Okay, it's a fulfillment. What does a he make it good? What's this message here that he's not a what, but a he? A who? Yeah. Ideas are great, right? Philosophies but how warm and close do you want to get? It's very impersonal there, right? It's the theory of, right? The philosophy of, the doctrine of the Trinity, or the doctrine of, we have a relationship with our God. He knows us. Does someone else have a hand that I see? I thought I saw. Go ahead back here. Okay, Kathy.
In the Old Testament, God is always referred to as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of David. He wasn't the people's God. They depended on a priest or David or Isaac or Abraham to intermediate between them and God. Well, now we have a God that doesn't need a mediator. He was here, and it goes back to
Mm-hmm.
they were saying about he understands us, what Roman said.
Yeah.
Now, in the New Testament, it's a personal God, where in the Old Testament, the people didn't seem to relate to God. Abraham related to God,
Right.
and the people related to Abraham.
He was so out of reach, seemingly, to them.
He's always, I don't know, it just always strikes me that they refer to him as the God of Abraham,
Mm-hmm.
the God of David, or the God of Isaac.
Right. That identity. Mm-hmm.
They don't seem to have a personal relationship with him.
And you remember how John begins his gospel there in chapter 1 of John, as he talks about this true light that came into the world. The world didn't understand it. And the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. He tabernacled. That's the word tabernacle. We've seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. And then John testified concerning this. This is the one who I spoke about. The law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. And not just the teaching, but what he did and what he showed us. Yes, his teachings were critical and important, but we don't just follow a doctrine. We don't just follow an idea or a teaching. We follow a person, a man. We follow him. And I think that's what the church is built upon. and everything will come out of that, all that we believe and do. Um, and so this is what he starts with. John would say the same thing. Look at John later on in 1 John. He says, remember when he writes, I love this language, or this 1 John chapter 1, now not the Gospel of John, but the end of the New Testament. That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, and which we have seen with our own eyes, which we have looked upon, or we have looked at, and our hands have touched. This we proclaim, the word of life. The life appeared. We have seen it and testify to it. And we proclaim to you the eternal life which was with the Father and has appeared to us. We proclaim to you that we have seen and heard, so that you may also have fellowship with us. And our fellowship is with the Father and with His Son, Jesus Christ. That idea there of this is what's real. This is what is that our life is built upon. It's rooted in good news. It's not, a new philosophy. It's not money. It's not power. It's not even good things that God gives. It's not rooted on the elders or the deacons or the preachers. It's built upon, it's rooted in Jesus Christ. That's the church. That's who we are, is His people. And so Timothy here is being told what the core of the gospel is, that He appeared in the flesh. And then he says he was, look at this. He just kind of, you just kind of go through here. He was vindicated or proven to be right by the Spirit. That this speaking of the empty tomb, right? I mean, Jesus is, if He doesn't resurrect, be raised, then everything He said was false. He's a liar. It all hinges on what? The empty tomb. As important as it is, and again, we got to remember that too. We're going to celebrate the Lord's Supper, but don't just leave Him in the tomb. I'll preach it until as long as I'm here. It is a resurrected Savior we worship this morning, not a dead Savior that we crucify every week in the communion. We remember a risen Savior. So don't leave that off. Let's emphasize the resurrection of Jesus Christ, because that is the key. Just Him dying alone without the resurrection is not the gospel. It's got to be that He rose again, and so He's vindicated by the Spirit. The Hebrew writer mentions that it was through the Spirit that He was raised, and so we see the work of the Father and the Son in that. He was seen by angels. This is probably just throughout, not just at His resurrection, but throughout His life in the wilderness there in Matthew 4, that the work of God with angels is seen in the life of Jesus and His ministry, and of course His death, the angels there that told the women there that, and so He was preached among the nations. Remember, Paul would say, I've gone everywhere. So the gospel has went forth. This isn't some, backwoods religion that just stays in the backwoods of the, this is a faith that has been penetrated every aspect of the world, of the known world at this time. The gospel had been preached before the Roman emperor. You remember what Paul says? That soldiers that are in the Praetorian Guard, that are in Caesar's house, have heard the gospel. Isn't that hard to imagine? Nero, one of the most ruthless emperors who ever was on the Roman throne, he had a chance to hear the gospel. We would equate that with somebody like Hitler. Nero was a psychotic murderer, tyrant, and yet the gospel was preached among his guards. That is so significant. The gospel has gone everywhere, and everywhere the gospel has went, what has happened? Yes, people have rejected the gospel everywhere it's went, but what else has happened? People have accepted. and change their life. There's evidence. Now, we don't want to make the gospel Christianity only about pragmatic, practical, like it works, and that's why it's true. Be careful with that. Okay, but it has been accepted, it has been embraced, it has been proclaimed everywhere in the world. And even to this very day, there is not a continent, there is not a country where the gospel has not been preached or is being preached, or there are Christians. They may be small, a few, but and it continues to this very day. Let me get here quickly here if we're running out of time. I mentioned proclaimed by the angels. Again, believed on in the world. I kind of got ahead of myself there. So it's been accepted and believed. And then it's been, he was taken up in glory, his ascension. And again, all of this gives stability for the church. If we stay on this, the church will be strong. The church won't be pulled away. The church won't get shipwrecked in its faith. This is the core, undisputed. This can't be disputed in the church. You cannot be a church. You cannot have Christianity and not believe this. I'm sorry. There are people that I've encountered over the years, and they'll say, I'm a Christian. And you'll start talking to them, and they'll all but deny the resurrection. Or they'll all but deny some aspect of the deity of Jesus. And I'm thinking, you are not, and I don't say this to them. And if they want to study and we want to get into a discussion about, but I'm thinking, you are not a Christian. You cannot be a Christian and deny these core beliefs. And this is the gospel foundation. And so the church has to, this is what members are expected to believe. And maybe if we did a little more of that in our churches, we might be better off instead of expecting very little out of our churches, I'll tell you in general. Not just churches of Christ, but in general now, but certainly in churches of Christ. The expectation level is very low. A lot of that is a desire because we want to see people come into the church. We want to see people be welcomed and received. And all of that is, I'm not against that. But we cannot compromise on what is the truth. And Paul is doing that here by saying this is the core that you have to be built upon. And so anyway. Well, we will pick up in chapter 4. He's going to get into some specifics now, and we'll start picking up the pace a little bit. I want to pick up the pace as he gets into some specifics about the false teaching. So interesting chapter in chapter 4. Be reading ahead.